With Sprite on the horizon and a host of powerful existing decks, the upcoming Master Duel format is certainly going to be something. But what if there's a deck that played on an entirely different axis to the rest of the meta? One that uses a piece of legacy support for a decade-old obscure anime deck to send your opponent right back to the menu before they even get their own turn. So how about we start off with the star of the show, Morphtronic Telefon. Now this is a level 1 Earth machine tuner monster with 100 attack and defense, and its effects are really where it shines, as when it's in attack position, you can once per turn during your main phase roll a 6-sided die, gain life points equal to the result times 100, then you can special summon one Morphtronic monster from your graveyard with a level equal to or lower to the result. Now it has a defense position effect where you can excavate cards and send cards to the grave if they're Morphtronic, but as far as this deck is concerned, that doesn't exist. The main effect is the attack position effect. You may be thinking, that seems neat, but Morphtronic monsters aren't very good, why would you want to reborn them? Because keep in mind and notice, Telefon does not state that you can't reborn another Telefon. And also notice that once per turn is a soft once per turn. You can infinitely loop and summon this card, provided you have a way to repeatedly get the other copy off the field. So in the TCG, this was toyed around with Cannon Soldier as an FTK, because it's very easy, but unfortunately Master Duel, most of that is banned. Now you could go the route of making the deck a sort of hardcore combo deck that makes a million negates, but that deck loses to everything every other hardcore combo deck that makes a million negates loses to, and doesn't really do anything unique. But, don't worry, the FTK is not dead in this format, because there's two very interesting and obscure cards that let you just barely mimic what Cannon Soldier used to do. And those two cards would be Fire Princess and Hysteric Fairy. Now, what do these cards actually do? Well, Fire Princess, each time you gain life points, you can inflict 500 burn damage to the opponent. Then, Hysteric Fairy lets you tribute 2 monsters to gain 1000 life points. So, the way the FTK works is use Fire Princess to burn, and the way you gain life points is Hysteric Fairy, which lets you gain them, and Telefon's effect. Now, Hysteric Fairy can be any monster that can infinitely tribute monsters, but I found that Hysteric Fairy, the ability to gain life points, and the fact it's level 4 makes it very versatile. But Fire Princess is really the star of the show, as it's your Cannon Soldier replacement. Now what kind of setup do you want? Well, you need at least 2 Telefon in the grave, 1 Telefon in the field, Fire Princess on the field, and Hysteric Fairy on the field. As having all of these lets you do the infinite loop, and that loop is using Telefon to keep summoning other Telefons, then tributing them with Hysteric Fairy to gain life points, to then burn a Fire Princess. And eventually you'll be doing 500 burn damage over and over, and eventually FTKing your opponent. Now it's no small task to actually get all these cards in rotation on the field, so how do you? Well, there's 2 very strong engines that let you get as much in the grave on the field as you could possibly want. And those 2 engines would be Danger and P.U.N.K. Now I'm sure you'll recognize Danger, it's very commonly played in a lot of heavy combo decks. It's a great way to discard cards, summon cards, and draw cards. Because if you didn't know, the way it works is you reveal a danger, discard a random card, then if it wasn't that danger, you summon the danger and draw 1, if it was the danger, you trigger a special effect. Then the other engine, that is pretty recently available with the upcoming set in Master Duel, is P.U.N.K. And this, with the new card Deer Note, lets you consistently summon sinkers like Chaos Ruler and make big XCs like Zombie Vampire to dump a bunch of cards in the grave and get a bunch of cards on the field very quickly and efficiently. They're also great help with going second, as the P.U.N.K engine lets you make something like Barone to destroy cards, and Dangers let you get big bodies on the field and trigger effects like Bigfoot to destroy cards on the field. Something that FTK decks have traditionally struggled a lot with is going second, so being able to do that better is very nice. And here's the deck list. Now it might seem a little chaotic, but that's because, well, this deck is pretty chaotic and it runs a bunch of generic cards that let it just vomit its whole deck into the grave on field. So that's for the actual cards I'm playing. I'm of course running the Fire Princess, Hysteric Fairy, and triple Telefon as previously stated. Then as for the P.U.N.K engine, I'm running double Foxy Tune, 1 Deer Note, and triple Xiamen. So the way this engine works, you Xiamen, and you can go ahead and search Foxy Tune, discard it and another card, summon Deer Note, then make Chaos Roller, and go off from there. Then for the dangers, I'm running triple Bigfoot, triple Thunderbird, triple Nessie, double Chupacabra, double Mothman, and 1 Jackalope. Now the very heavy level 8 focus is because there's some very strong rank 8s like Coach King Giant Trainer that we always want to be making. And so it's very nice to have access to them. These cards also make going second a breeze and definitely help a lot with that. Then I'm running double Destrudo, which is a very strong tuner monster, lets you just get bodies on the field, lets you make some strong synchros like Ancient Fairy Dragon very easy. And I'm running it too because you do commonly want to see it, and without something like Hulk, it's kind of hard to get access to it. And so, you know, it's nice to run it too, but at 3, it's a hard once return card, it'll get a little bit bricky. Then Shaddoll Beast is an ace card because when it's into the graveyard card effect, you just draw one. And so plenty of effects can trigger this, and refueling your hand is great. Then Fairy Tail Snow is amazing. It's a very strong extender, as it's a level 4, you can make powerful rank 4s, but it's also a way to interrupt the opponent if you want to make a going first board if you didn't succeed at the FTK, or if you're going second to bait out interaction. So it's a very versatile card that's amazing in this deck. Of course, triple Maxi, it's Master Duel, what do you expect? Then Jet Synchron, which is a strong little tuna monster. You can make some decent synchros with it. It gets an extra body in field, it discards cards. It's just pretty nice. Then triple Emergency Teleport, as this lets you summon Xiamen, which is great. Not having to use your normal summon, that helps a ton. Then Pot of Avarice, as at some point in the combo, you'll want to kind of refuel on the dangers, and it's a good way to do that. I'm not really running more because it's very easy to brick on this card, and by the time you need 3 Pot of Avarices, something has probably gone wrong and you're probably not getting the FTK anyways. Then Monster Reborn, as you'll very frequently want certain monsters on the field that will be in the grave, like Fire Princess. Then Foolish Burial, to get those monsters in the graveyard. Then 1-for-1 is a great way to either summon Telefon or Jet Synchron, depending on what you need in the situation, and it also lets you discard monsters, which is pretty nice. Then for the extra deck, I'm running Link Karibo and Relinquished Anima. Now these purpose is to get Telefon off the field, as you can link it away and keep looping it, so this lets you make something like a Saryuya pretty easily. It also helps that Anima is nice going second, and Link Karibo is nice going first. Then Cross Sheep is the first of what is basically the bulk of the extra deck, cards that get monsters from the grave or hand onto the field. A Cross Sheep, it has a couple effects, but the relevant one is when a fusion monster is summoned to a zone it points to, then you special summon 1 level 4 lower monster from your graveyard. And this can be, you know, Fire Princess, Hysteric Fairy, or Telefon. So this is a great card. Now the fusion you will be using to activate this is Trishula, the Dragon of Icy Imprisonment. This card's effect is not very good, but the relevant part is that it's a fusion monster that you can contact fuse using pretty much completely generic materials. So you just go ahead and contact fuse this card to a zone Cross Sheep points to, and reborn an important monster. Do remember, don't use just a straight up Telefon for this card's material because you can't get it back, and that's pretty miserable. Then, one of the strongest cards that are printed, banned in the TCG, Curious the Lightsorn Dominion. This, if it's made of 3 monsters with the same attribute, different types, you can go ahead and send 1 card from your deck to the grave. You just mill anything. It's basically just super Foolish Burial. Then it mills 3 afterwards. So this is very easy to make with the Danger Engine, as well as some stuff with the Punks, and it's an amazing card. And it's a high link level monster, so you can go ahead and make something like Firewall or Appaloosa. Now not only do these help you interrupt the opponent and tear apart boards, Firewall's effect, when it's co-linked, lets you actually recycle cards from your grave into your own hand, which is very useful. Then Saryuya, which is an amazingly broken card for this deck. It lets you draw cards and summon cards from your hand. What more could you ask for? Then we have Dugara's, which has a couple different effects, and it's rank 4, so you can detach 2 materials from this card, then you can skip your next draw phase, then draw 2 and discard 1, which is great, but the almost better effect is that you can skip your next main phase, then special summon 1 monster from your grave in defense position. Now keep in mind, this card's not very useful for getting Telefon into the field because it'll be in defense position, and its effect might as well not be there. But it's great for getting Hysteric Fairy or Fire Princess on the field for the FTK. Then we have Zombie Vampire, a rank 8 that lets you mill 4 cards from both decks to the graveyard, then you can special summon one of those monsters to your field. That is a great way to, say, fetch something like a Telefon and put it on your field, or another extender, and it's pretty easy to make. Then the other rank 8, the more unique one, is Coach King Giant Trainer, which must be made with 3 level 8 monsters, but the reward is that you can detach one material from this card, draw one card and show it, then if it was a monster, burn for 800, but you cannot do your battle phase during this turn. And that's not a once per turn, so you can do that 3 times in a turn, drawing 3. Which is an amazing effect in a deck full of dangers, and it's not at all hard to make this card with the P.U.N.K engine. Then we have the Post-Errata Ancient Fairy Dragon, which in this deck is mostly relevant for just being a synchro that lets you special summon a level 4 lower monster from your hand, so you can get something like Telefon or Hysteric Fairy onto the field. Then, Chaos Ruler. This is what you're making with the P.U.N.K engine with Xiamen and Deer Note, as it lets you excavate the top 5 cards of your deck, add an excavated light or dark monster, which is almost your whole deck, then mill the rest to the grave. And when this card's in the grave, you can banish one light and dark from your hand or grave, and special summon it. So this is a very easy way to get multiple, steps worth of level 8 monster in the field to make rank 8s like Coach King Giant Trainer. Then we have Ravenous Croco Dragon Archetype, which, relevantly, when it's synchro summoned, lets you just draw a card, which is great in this deck. It's not hard to make when you have cards like Telefon and Jet Synchron along with something like Chaos Ruler. Then we have Burrow and Defluer, which is just an Omni-Negate that pops cards. It's good going first to keep insulation against hand traps, and it's great going second to break boards. And as previously stated, Trishula's there to trigger Koshi. So now let's see how the deck actually plays. So how do you actually FTK? Well, here's a showcase of how you do, and the basics is that you just activate effects, vomit cards in the grave, summon stuff from the field until you get your setup, as your whole deck is basically just built out of extenders. In this case, the hand is Morphtronic Telefon, Foolish Burial, E-Telly, Snow, and Maxi. So, to go ahead and lead off with, we go ahead and go to the main phase, then activate E-Telly to get Xiamen to get the P.U.N.K engine going. Go and use its effect to search from your hand Foxy Tune, discard Snow, summon Deer Note, summon Chaos Ruler, then chain Deer Note to reborn the Foxy Tune, excavate 5, in this case plenty of darks to choose from, grabbing Bigfoot, trigger Beast to draw 1 card, and trigger Xiamen to chain block. Then go ahead and use Bigfoot's effect, in this case discarding E-Telly, make Giant Trainer, and fire its effect off 3 times to draw 3 cards. Now here I honestly misclicked and put an extra monster zone, which didn't end up being an issue, but you'll probably want to keep in your main monster zone because you'll not always be using Giant Trainer as link material immediately. But here we have Ancient Fairy Dragon, which I'm summoning, summon Telefon from hand, bring back Chaos Ruler, using Telefon again, to go ahead and reborn the other Telefon, make Croco Dragon, draw 1 card, then use Mothman, summon itself, draw 1, use Bigfoot, discard Nessie, trigger Nessie, we drew Fire Princess, which is nice, make Saryuya, to then draw 4, put back, use Foolish Burial to dump Hysteric Fairy, the sort of last piece, then go ahead and summon the last Telefon of 1 for 1, use Avarice to just put cards back in the deck to get more gas in our hand, use Saryuya to put Fire Princess on the field, and then we go ahead and try and summon Chupacabra to make Dugaras to bring back the Hysteric Fairy, because now we have the FTK set up. So here you can see what it actually looks like. Trigger Hysteric Fairy, gain 1000, burn 500, trigger Telefon, bring back the other Telefon, do burn damage, trigger Hysteric Fairy, and rinse and repeat until eventually do enough burn damage to kill the opponent. Which is pretty nice, and this will take a while and you'll have to get pretty good at clicking fast, or else that magical timer might actually kill you. It's a little bit of a long FTK, although hopefully by the time your opponent sees this, they'll just surrender. So what happens if your hand isn't quite good enough to get to the FTK? What do? Well, don't worry, you don't necessarily lose the whole duel. You can still do some pretty impressive things. In this case, I just go ahead and combo off. Still under the assumption they'll be able to FTK, so I'll be playing it to that. Go ahead and use Deer Note, and you'll see me discarding Maxi, and that's mostly because if you're going to FTK the opponent, Maxi doesn't matter. But if you can tell your hand is bad enough that you won't get to the FTK, I would try and keep it in your hand as long as possible. But I see I'm making Giant Trainer, something you'll want to do a lot because basically double Pot of Greed on a monster is okay-ish, I would say. So I've drawn a bunch of cards, I have Chupacabra, discard the Shudo, then go ahead and use Nessie's effect, discarding Jet Synchron, drawing. This kind of deck works, you just trigger dangers a bunch, vomit card in the field, but I go ahead and make Baron, because this instantly speed from hand traps, and I kind of have gotten the feeling the FTK is not happening. I'm still stuck with just one copy of Telefon, which is not ideal. And I didn't play this perfectly, because I was still kind of trying the FTK, but mostly this will give you an idea of what this does and how it works. So in here, I go ahead and use Avarice to just shuffle and draw, see if I can draw anything relevant. I kind of do, but, Thunderbird missing really hurts. So I go and just make Link Kuriboh and pass. So, what does this board do? Well, we have a 4 material Appaloosa for 4 monster negates, the Omni negate from Baron, the Link Kuriboh effect, and a Fairy Tale Snow in the grave to put a card face down. There's not a ton of hands that can comfortably play through this end board, and with the effects like Baron, you can bring stuff from the grave back on the field for a follow-up on the next turn. And this was after me kind of still trying to go for the FTK very late. If you were kind of not gambling, you could probably make a board with some Firewall Dragon on the field as well, and have a bigger hand. So it is nice that the FTK doesn't lose automatically if it can't get to the FTK. So in conclusion, do I think this deck will have a huge meta impact? No, it's pretty gimmicky, especially without Cannon Soldier. But it is worth looking at as a sort of different way to play the game. And I mean, hey, it's pretty close to tier limits before tier limits even get to come out. So I'd say it's worth a shot, and at least keeping in mind in case you run into it on the ladder. Make sure to save those imperms for when the Fire Princess hits the field. Thank you for making it this far into the video. If you liked it and want to see more in the future, please feel free to subscribe or leave any feedback you have in the comment section below.